New CBS Sunday.
The Grammys, baby!
History will be made.
Live, unfiltered, unexpected.
Woo!
Bigger than ever.
I was a ghost.
Bigger stars, bigger performances. Music's biggest night is getting bigger.
Now you see what all the hype is about.
Trevor Noah hosts the Grammy Awards live.
Anything is possible.
CBS Sunday and streaming on Paramount Plus.
This is the Tudors Dynasty and Beyond podcast. History with a twist. And now your host, Rebecca Larson.
Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Rebecca Larson, and I'm very pleased to welcome to the show for the very first time, Elizabeth Goff. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to chat with you. You have a new book that's coming out. It's your first book, actually, called Bloody Brilliant Tudors, 100 Tales of Gowns, Gossip, and Gory Ends. I think this cover is absolutely beautiful, by the way.
Yeah, it's the it was the press preview, the little press copies that went out, but I love it so much. The guys did a lovely job of it. Yeah.
It really does make a difference. You know, we always joke not to judge a book by its cover, but I think we all really do, don't we, when it comes to purchasing books?
Yeah. When you go past, especially on like the history books as well, you want to like try and get some attention, some little spark of interest. And I think it's a lovely cover. I think they've done such a lovely job.
They have. Okay, well, I just said that you're brand new to the show. So would you mind introducing yourself to those maybe who don't know you yet?
Yes, on social media, I run the Historical Gal accounts mainly on Instagram and TikTok, but I'm also on YouTube. And I do short stories of interesting tidbits from the fabulous dramatic dynasty of the Tudors. That's where my speciality lies. There's stuff that people know, but other things that are sort of lesser known. And I really love the sort of background women characters, that the women who basically kind of ran the Tudors from behind the scenes. It's their lives and their stories that are so fascinating and interesting. And just to get people aware of the fact that the Tudors is more than Henry and his wives and Elizabeth. Like there's so much more and sometimes more interesting other bits and bobs that you can pick out and enjoy. So that's what I kind of set out to do on my pages, is to just sort of get sometimes lesser known stories and also weird little facts and funny little stories that you learn when you visit these places and these historical sites.
Yeah. You talk about these lesser known women. That's always been my passion too, is looking into these women in history who have been living in the shadows for far too long. And I'm excited to know that this is something that you're passionate about too. I know we're not the only ones who are passionate about bringing these women's stories to the forefront. But out of these women, is there anyone in particular who stands out to you?
No questions. It's Lady Penelope Devereux. I think she is beyond fabulous. She is sensational. She caused such a ruckus and didn't learn by her mother's example, did her own thing, survived a rebellion. She's just wonderful. She is such an incredibly interesting character, and I was trying to find as much as I could on her to include her in the book, and there's not that much about her, which is a shame, but she's such a babe. That's the only other words I can think of. She's like a trailblazer. She did her own thing when it wasn't the time to do it, and I just really admire her, and I think she's fantastic. Again, she could be a whole Stars HBO series all of her own. Like, she could have her own little 8-parter or whatever. Netflix could pick it up, we could write it.
But you built her up so much now. I'm curious, are there any stories about her that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, when she was going to go and get, her mother was Lettice Knowles, who famously married Elizabeth I's favourite, Robert Dudley, sort of in a very underhanded manner, and it set Elizabeth off like you wouldn't believe, and she banned her from ever coming back to court. And Penelope, her daughter, didn't so much like learn from her mother's example and become quiet and kind of like not want the spotlight. She sort of did the opposite. And one example is on her wedding day, this young Penelope, when she was told she was going to get married to Lord Rich and she did not want to, she said no. And they were like, well, you're doing it. And even to the point of they were at the aisle, they were at the altar, and she still said, no, I don't want to do it. Eventually she had to be, corralled and cajoled into doing it. But to have the balls to be at the altar and say, no, I don't think I can, and I don't want to, or whatever she said, and to just to want to do that and to have you know, the gumption to do that, I think is incredible. And unfortunately, she did have to marry him and she did bear him the children and blah, 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 blah. But then she went off to have a very long-winded affair with Charles Blount, and they had loads of children together, and it was sort of an open secret. But Elizabeth I, for whatever reason, sort of let her get away with it.
Hmm.
In It was all sort of interesting ways of how you look how Elizabeth treated Penelope. And also her Penelope had a brother, Robert, who was Elizabeth I's last great favourite as well. The Devereux family was very much on the rise with Elizabeth I, but I just think she's fascinating. I think she's such a brilliant, brilliant woman. And to have, like I said, the gumption to do what she did, just to be like, oh, well, I'm going to behave like a man and see what happens and not learn from her mum, just do like, go all guns blazing, I think is wonderful.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you think she learned that from her mom, being raised by such a strong woman like Lettice?
Exactly. I don't know. Maybe you would fall into two camps. You would be, I will be demure and I will listen, or I will just follow what my mum did. I wonder what Lettice herself would have said. Would she have been like, do not do anything like I did?
Yeah.
Where it's gotten me, I've banned from court. I can't ever come back. The Queen hates me, keeps, my husband away from me, all these things. Or did she say, do whatever you want because, it's you that's got to get you somewhere? So I don't know. It would be
Yeah.
fascinating to see the mother-daughter conversations that they had. And obviously there's nothing left to history as to what she did tell her. But I think it's so fascinating to think about. I know you have to fill in a lot of the blanks like with these women, which is unfortunate, but you can put your own sort of stamp on Penelope, say if she had that chat with her mum or didn't have that chat with her mum. And I just think it's wonderful. And she's such a babe.
I love that. As you were saying that, I was thinking, which kind of daughter am I? And I was definitely the more rebellious daughter who went against whatever my mom said.
Really? I love that.
Oh, you want me to do it XYZ? Nope, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do T, A, and
Oh my
F.
God.
So
I love it.
I guess I can write. Which kind of daughter were you?
Oh, goody two shoes, like painfully had to do by the book, everything, everything, everything. That's just how I've been. Not because they've demanded it, just because that's how naturally I'm a great warrior, overthinker, stressor. So it's just easier to do as I'm told, then that's just one less thing to worry about.
I totally understand that too. One of the things that I've always found so fascinating is people's passion and maybe obsession for the Tudors. And you have a lot of followers on social media, so I'm sure that you see this play out a lot. Why is it that people are still so fascinated by this dynasty after so many centuries?
I think it's the drama. I think it's the absolute drama behind from when they got here to when they ended. It was just one long, protracted, juicy, salacious drama. You couldn't even everything the monarchy had like peppered throughout, the expanse of it to this day is wedged in their one very quite small really chunk of time that they ruled. And so I think that condensed activity, it breeds so much interest in these people were just so fascinating. And I think if you have a king who is willing to kill his wife, not only kill her, but publicly kill her, and then do it again a second time, I think that alone that is just enough to write books about for centuries. So add on everything else on top of it. It's just, I think it's just, they are just so in themselves as people, absolutely fascinating. And I think that's what just inspires everybody to just to adore them or hate them, but still research them and
Yeah.
want to know more and understand more and everything like that. And I think even look at like Anne Boleyn, like there's no confirmed likeness of her at the minute. There's no, so this woman who was loved and adored, then obsessively hated, and then murdered. We don't have an actual image of her. So that's wild, isn't it? Like how did we've psychologically we've latched onto her and her story, but when you actually get to the bones of like we don't the even the fundamental of what she looked like isn't really there. So
Yeah.
even that I think is just it's fascinating to look at us looking at them like why are we so like
Yes.
enthralled by one of these wives who doesn't have a face really, but it's just their stories that lead us in and absorb us.
Yeah, not knowing their true face. When we look at Catherine Howard as well, right? We don't have a confirmed portrait of Catherine Howard, yet she isn't quite as popular as Anne Boleyn. And I just, I'm always curious about that. Is it just because Anne had Elizabeth that we tend to put more focus on Anne?
I think there wasn't I think there wasn't the run up of devastation for Catherine Howard. It was, the awful like old man loves a very young girl, like, that kind of yucky thing over there. That's very different to getting rid of a princess of Spain,
Mm,
changing religion, and then marrying for such a short time to then kill her. That whole that all of those events, I think, was such a massive run up to the collapse of it all. And with Catherine Howard, I suppose she is as much as she like isn't in true to life. She wasn't like a silly little slut that she is portrayed as, kind of constantly repeated again and again and again and again. Um, that awful kind of reputation that she has, kind of in certain programs, certainly when you watch them, it's almost semi, or she did sort of deserve it a little bit. That kind of
mhm.
awful, she did behave badly or, recklessly, but it's very different, isn't it? She was naughty or she was confirmed to be bad or
Yeah.
whatever it was. So not enough to be have a head chopped off by any stretch of the imagination. But there is that like she was scandalous. So that was the punishment meted out for her crime, whereas Anne had nothing. She'd done nothing and it was just all invented. But this has more substance to it, I suppose. But it is definitely her almost a caricature, I think, in social media and in literature and everything. She certainly comes over a certain way. And I think that's just kind of compelled her image. And that's just my kind of little thought on it. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong, in any way, but that's just kind of how I think she's been viewed, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you on that. Other than Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, is there another Tudor woman whose reputation has been unfairly maybe flattened by history that you can think of?
Oh, I think maybe perhaps that Catherine Parr was quite dour and she was like the nursemaid to Henry towards the end of his life. I think that's sort of a very Victorian kind of view of her. Like she was a bit of an old matron and she looked after him, when in fact she was like quite spicy, in who she was and so I think that certainly was changed slightly with the Queen's Gambit Firebrand. I
Yeah,
don't know if you've read the book. The book is so
I
good.
loved the book way more than the movie.
Yes, same. I thought the film was good, but the changes were like I wasn't expecting them to when I was watching. I was like, "What's happening?"
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
But to anyone who hasn't seen or read, go and do it, because that to me feels more like Katherine, as you know, as she was, sort of thing. But she was really fab and really dynamic, and I think she's been sort of maybe kind of forgotten, left off, like just being labeled as survivor, when in fact her story got even juicier after after his death, and when she went off and remarried and things. So she was really interesting to certainly to write about and to read about. So I think maybe perhaps Catherine Parr.
Yeah, she is definitely way more fascinating than history has given her credit for. And that book, by the way, I was very disappointed. I don't know if you know this or not, but I've been researching Thomas Seymour for about 10 years now. And so when I read the book, it like really brought their relationship kind of to life. And then when it
Mm.
came to the film, it was like there was hardly any of what was in the book, any of the passion and the romance maybe that was in the book was kind of taken out in the film, and he was just made to look like a dark lord, basically, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he was kind of like a footnote, wasn't he? He was of no, there wasn't really anything there at all. If you didn't know the background, you wouldn't really,
Yeah.
there wasn't much to go on in the film at all. So that was a bit peculiar, but
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Um, so, okay, so here's we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but is the Tudor reputation for brutality, do you think is it deserved or do you think it's exaggerated?
I think you always must view it within the context of how they lived then and things. And certainly when you when you hear about the punishments meted out to people, like having your innards taken out, and they're certainly very exotic ways to be killed.
Yeah.
Um, but it's within the context of the time that they were living in, I suppose. Looking at it from now, it's horrific, but it was. There's a chapter in the book, A Great Day Out, which is going off to a Tudor execution, because it was like people would take picnics and go and enjoy seeing like the local criminals of the day be hung and drawn and quartered, or just whatever the punishment was going to be for them. So it was entertainment, it was justice, it was, whatever it may be. So I don't, that's a really difficult question to answer, because yes, they were brutal, and Henry boiling a chef alive, I think
Right.
no, like, absolutely not. But then you make examples, because there's no other forms of, I don't know, it's really interesting to think about. It's a really great question, but I think the only thing I can say is view in the context of the time doesn't make it any easier, but you can sort of see why the reputation wouldn't have meant so much to them, because it meant they were powerful, in
Yeah.
control. I'm making an example of Bob, who's being executed on Tower Hill. Like, all of you can see Bob with his head being taken off, and now it's on Tower Bridge. Don't ever do it again. And you can see the power of that imagery of being executed or hung or whatever it may have been, because they didn't have the power of the press and all these other things. And also thinking about how many English people wouldn't know what the monarch looked like unless it was on there was a painting in a church or in a alehouse or something somewhere, or they saw a coin. It was such, I didn't really kind of register how they were so sort of faceless, unless it was on royal progress or they were seen, which is why Elizabeth loved to go out and about so much on her progress and make a show of herself, to be like, I am here, I am powerful and omnipresent, I am everywhere.
Mhm.
Don't worry, I'm looking after you, whatever it may be. So I think the power of visual image probably accounted for a lot, and that would go for executions as well.
I'm glad that you brought up Elizabeth because I did want to ask you, and this might be a difficult question to answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway, and I hope you can do your best. Do you think Elizabeth the First was more successful than other Tudor monarchs at shaping her own legacy?
Yes, I would say so, because she had the time to invest in herself and in her legacy, because she was there for so long, because she was had such a good run up to
Hmm.
to get her to get her reputation and decide on her, I would say nickname, that's not the right word, but the Virgin Queen, like the I can't remember the right word would be, like her tagline, her strap line to her
Her
life, like
motto.
yeah, like that is who I am. This is the essence of who I am.
Yeah.
She had the time to do it, but then also she chopped it all off at the end by not naming a successor and getting rid of all of the people who could potentially be successors, and then eventually just it kind of just tumbled to James in whatever fashion, she did it. And I've just finished reading Tracy Borman's The Stolen Crown, which is fascinating in the handover of power from Elizabeth to
Yeah.
James and how truly muddled it really was. So when she, I suppose, kind of chopped off her own legacy a little bit towards the end, because James kind of they wanted to rush to forget Gloriana and move on to a new dynasty, and a man was going to be in charge. Great, fantastic. And then as the years rolled on, it was like, oh my God, we had it really good under Elizabeth. Like that was a real shame. And like the legend of Gloriana kind of just went up and up and up and up and up. And she had that, he created that magnificent tomb for her, and she became like a mini kind of cult through the sheer kind of lack of star power of her follow-up. So she obviously had that in her. We shouldn't realize it, but she had that in her kind of powerhouse of like anything else after me will seem rubbish. So, I will be even more glorious to everybody when I'm gone. So I think she gave it a good run up. And I think like Mary the First had no time, Edward had beyond no time,
Yeah.
and Henry kind of got lost in his own pain and misery towards the end to, even not have a tomb built for himself. So
Right.
yeah, so I think so. I think she did. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I like to compare her to her father, Henry VIII, because I feel like Henry VIII, he had a decent length reign, and I think he wanted his reign to be seen as like this conqueror and this king who brought France back into the fold. And, like all he wanted to
Yeah,
do, I think, was be the next Holy Roman Emperor or even the Pope. He would have liked any of that.
all of the above.
Yeah, Elizabeth was a little bit more subdued, and maybe that's the feminine side of her, is she understood, I think, the bigger picture because of the life that she lived. She
Mm,
understood what maybe her reputation was coming to the throne, being the daughter of Anne Boleyn, how she would have to overcome that, but also being the second queen regnant, and having to use her sister even maybe as a model of how to do
mm.
that and then yet shape it herself. Yeah, I think she, even though I'm not a huge fan of Elizabeth, I think she did a good job at rounding out the Tudors at the end and leaving a good legacy.
Yeah, confirmed. I agree.
I mean, she has so many great stories. I when it
Yeah,
comes to Elizabeth, she's just one of the monarchs where you go, there are endless tales, I feel like, to talk about when it comes to her. I know you're big into gowns and jewelry and stuff like that too. When you look at Elizabeth, were there any interesting stories that you found about her when it came to clothing?
well, she knew the power of clothing, that's for sure. She knew how to make a statement. And I loved like when, because her sister Mary was known for being quite kind of gaudy in her clothing choices and fabric choices. And she would have clashing everything, and it was just rich and heavy and beautiful. And she just loved shopping and stuff like that. Because I think being such a staunch like Roman Catholic, they're all about color, aren't they? And
Yeah.
stained glass windows and all of that. So I think she kind of put that on herself as well, which I love. But then while she was doing that, Elizabeth only wore black and white. So to be plain and simple and not outshine the Queen, but also making a massive statement, that, I am Protestant, or am I not? We don't know, but I just like to use
Yeah.
black and white, simple, and the Queen should have lovely colours and blah blah blah. But that I thought was really fascinating, and the story of the three brothers duel that Elizabeth loved to wear. It came from, I believe, her brother, Edward VI. Um, and she wore that at every possible opportunity. And James used the same jewel. And she had a beautiful set of black pearls that came from, I believe, Catherine de' Medici, gave them to Mary, Queen of Scots. And then Mary left them in Scotland, and the Lord sold it. And Elizabeth bought them in honor of her cousin or some such, play with words Elizabeth would have said, and wore them in her honor and absolutely loved them. And they are pictured again and again and again when she's being painted, which probably shows how much she did love them. Um, and yeah, gosh, and the fact, mortifyingly finding out at the end that James I sold off all the royal wardrobe, um, because he wanted to raise some money, because he wouldn't get married again after his wife had died. He told his council to go and sell the entirety of the royal wardrobe, the Queen's wardrobe, which went as far back as, it was like Elizabeth I past and past queens. So you think, what was he getting rid of? Like, how many things was he getting rid of? And your heart just bleeds at the thought of, like, is it, how, medieval? How far back are we going? Like, what, these items in the royal wardrobe, how far back did they go? And he sold them all off and got rid of everything because he felt like it, because he's selfish. I don't know. But when
Wow.
I found out about it, I was absolutely agog that that was the case. I assumed it was something to do with Oliver Cromwell with the Civil War or whatever, but
Yeah.
no. He was like, I'll never get married again. I'll just get rid of them. Pardon?
Wow.
What? So
I wonder if it's because he wasn't born in England, so he didn't feel the connection to items, English items, like maybe an English monarch would have.
perhaps it could be any number of reasons, but the fact that he had, I don't know if his elder son had died at that point, but he certainly had a son who would have a queen consort. So you think, well, leave something for, the rest of the
Yeah.
the family or whatever. But just the idea of pillaging through, like, the royal wardrobe wherever it was kept, if it was at Richmond or the Tower or wherever, just going through and selling off whatever, it just think, oh my God. But that was a serious black mark against James' name for
Yeah.
me. I was
Yeah.
absolutely on the floor when I was researching that. I think, are they still around now? Are they here? Like, is it like the Bacton altar cloth, which is a
Yeah.
small, should be a small fragment of Elizabeth I's dress, probably donated by Blanche Parry, one of her ladies in waiting. But are there any more of those around? Like, are they hiding in plain sight somewhere? Have they been used for something? The mind boggles.
It does. I think I had read somewhere many, many years ago, and I don't remember the source, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, but that during the Great Fire of London, that many of Elizabeth's dresses were destroyed at that time too. Did you ever come across anything like that when you were researching?
I didn't, but that's not to say that's certainly not the case. But I know that Anne of Denmark, James's wife, she repurposed almost all of Elizabeth's wardrobe, or if she wasn't using it, she cut it up for masks and plays and costumes for people to reuse. So Elizabeth would have been spinning if she found that.
Do we call that upcycling now?
Oh, yeah. I mean, use it, don't lose it. Like, totally get Anne's vibe. I think, yeah, definitely go through. But the fact, like, chopping them up, merrily chopping them up with her seamstresses to remake costumes, think, well, like,
It's so
what were they? Were these gowns that were used in portraits or whatever? You think, would you have been able to recognize them? And I always think with Anne of Denmark, I really love Anne. I think she's a really cool character. But when I look at images of her, she really reminds me of Elizabeth I.
mm,
And I don't know if it's because she's perhaps wearing the same dresses that have been just redone in the newer style. But I was at where was I? Losley Park, I think. And they said that I think it's Losley Park. They have two massive portraits of James and Anne. And I said, "Gosh, she looks so much like Elizabeth." And they said they think that it is Elizabeth, but they've reworked the face as Anne because it was cheaper to, like, just do a bit of
Touch up.
You have to do a touch up. So he said, the guy that he was really lovely, and he said it's like we're pretty sure it is Elizabeth underneath, but there's been no testing on it or anything because it's not like a National Gallery piece or anything like that. So I thought that was really fascinating. I was like, oh, okay. And when you look at the imaging of her, it is very suspiciously similar for some of these portraits, especially the full length ones. So it is a wonder if it could be the
I,
same woman underneath.
I love portraits. And, Dr. Emma, who co-hosts Dr. Emma and me every Thursday, she's an art historian, and she talks a lot about how she believes that people are fascinated with the Tudors because of art. If we didn't have all the Holbein sketches, if we didn't have all the paintings, would people be as interested in the stories if they didn't have faces to put with them?
That's a very, very good point.
Yeah.
But then it brings you back to Anne Boleyn not having a face and Catherine Howard not having a face. Yet here they are still being, dramatized and discussed. So I think I think he gives, especially Holbein gives so much of the background characters of his, even just his sketches are so dynamic. And I went to a Holbein exhibition a couple of years ago. I was so grateful that it was at Buckingham Palace, and they were jaw-dropping to see in person. It's like they were there with you. It was spectacular. And so I do agree in that respect to have these even like random ambassadors or ladies or whoever it is, but to see these real living people and how they dressed and how they wore jewelry and accessories and stuff, that gives life to everything. But on the other hand, there are so many important people that don't have a face, but are still so iconic in every way. So I think it's a really interesting kind of column A, column B, like which
Yes.
one you prefer sort of thing. I think it's fascinating.
How about if you had to choose one Tudor story that best captures the human cost of power, which would it be?
Um, the Grey sisters.
Oh, that's a good one.
I would say the not necessarily for the younger sister, but I think for there was three Grey sisters and how their lives were so catastrophically dreadful. I think they were a real cost of powerful people around them and being put in positions they didn't want to be put in.
Mm,
And I think they are, I mean, there's a lot of tragedy in the Tudors, but I think especially Catherine Grey, I think is one of the most tragic things I've ever read, listened to, heard, researched. I think her story is painful. And it really made me think twice about my opinions on Elizabeth I and how she treated her.
yeah.
I was very like, I love Elizabeth, think she's great. And that was probably my biggest takeaway from the book was that I actually came away thinking I don't like Elizabeth particularly. I can admire her,
Yeah.
but my overwhelming sense was I don't agree with you or like you on most instances throughout your life. And I think it's shameful how she uh, treated the remaining Grey sisters myself. But I don't know
Yeah.
how you feel about it or what you think or but
Well, I definitely am not a fan of Elizabeth.
yeah,
And that story in particular is one of the reasons why, and other women, who served her, who had felt the need to secretly marry, because I'm sure they thought if they had asked Elizabeth, she would have said no, no matter what. And then how Elizabeth reacted to that. We think about what was her name? The wife of Walter Raleigh, Elizabeth. Oh my gosh, Throckmorton. Um, yeah,
oh
Bess
God.
Bess Throckmorton. She went off and secretly married another one of Elizabeth's favorites. She knew, she had to have known Elizabeth's not going to be too happy with me for marrying one of her favorites, and yet she did for love, right?
Yeah. And I think because you kind of get stuck, don't you, between it's never going to happen anyway. So what am I going to do? Like wither up and die while serving her? Or, you know, if I get banished, so be it, but I'm going to be happy,
Yeah.
and you just go for it as best you can, I suppose. But with like Catherine Grey, the punishment didn't meet the crime, but then also you can understand like, the succession, blah blah blah, all these other things. Like, but I can see it, but
Yeah.
the absolute cruelty that she showed Catherine and her sons and her husband, like it beggars belief, how she was treated. So I think they would be, and of course poor Jane got her head chopped off for no reason other than being put there by someone else.
Yeah.
So it's just the horror given to these poor sisters because of the change in Henry VIII's will however many years earlier, and then Edward the Sixth changing it again, like all of these like little tiny, almost like inconsequential things just snowballed into this shameful waste of life. Um, I think so. I think they would be the biggest example of human sacrifice of power, I would say.
Yeah. I feel like I've been talking about Elizabeth a lot on this show lately, and one of the topics that we just did was the Sunday episode where we have that series called Off the Record, and we do a lot of what ifs. What if
Yeah.
this had happened instead? And I think one of the recent ones that we did was what if Mary, Queen of Scots, had not been executed by Elizabeth I? And when you look at that period there, I really think, like, do you think Elizabeth had a choice? Do you think she could have let Mary live?
I don't think so. I think it had just gone on for so long, and it was just like the because it's always obviously hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? But when I've been doing research into Mary, because I find Mary quite hard to research. I think I struggle with her choices and her decisions, and
Mhm.
when especially prior to being in captivity over here, but then during captivity, she's so exhausting with all her like schemes. And I know she was like set up for some of them, like I do understand that, but she's hard work and you think just stop it, just stop. Like, just give but then it's she believed that God told said that she should be the next in line, blah blah blah. So it's really difficult, but reading her choices and her decisions, you just don't just like leave it be, like
Mhm.
chill out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the right word is, but like just stop. You can only know this is not going to go well because each and every time it's gone wrong, gone wrong, gone wrong, gone wrong. And then ultimately at the end, Elizabeth's like, you have left me no other fathomable choice than to do this.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't think she was wrong. I think the fact it went on so long was what made it all the more terrible, I suppose, at the end.
Yeah. More
Um,
more tragic, maybe.
Yeah, and then there's also her son didn't help her particularly either. He didn't reach out. He didn't send this, that, and the other. He didn't do it. He was still having like pocket money from Elizabeth. So it's, like holy heck, like he wanted to rule more than he wanted to save his mum's life. So if he'd given up hope for her, you think, well, what's that? Elizabeth's just stuck with her for
Yeah.
forever and a day. I think Elizabeth should have met her. I think that was a mistake but then it's interesting. I wonder if they had have met, would she not have executed her because she'd have become a real
Person.
person?
Yeah.
So that's also interesting to think about. If they had have met, I wonder if things that would have changed the course of everything because she'd have been a real breathing person rather than an entity that's in the Midlands somewhere that she has to give a headache over.
Hmm.
She would be her cousin, the Queen of Scots. So I think that's fascinating. But I think Elizabeth wasn't really given much choice myself, and I think Mary didn't help herself.
I kind of compare it a little bit to Mary the First and Lady Jane Grey, because Mary the First also reached a point where she was like, "What am I to do? People are going to keep throwing up rebellions to try and put her back on the throne, and if I, keep her alive, it's not going to stop it. I have to do away with her." And I wonder if that's how Elizabeth ultimately felt like, okay, well, my sister had to do this too, and this is a tough choice, but
She wouldn't have, yeah, she would have certainly have thought that, I'd have imagined, because it's killing
yeah,
Jane wasn't an anointed queen, was she? But she was kind of close enough.
yeah.
And obviously looking back to her mum as well, you know, I don't know, it must have been a whole, and the fact she was talking about Mary on her deathbed, I think probably says a lot about what it cost her, I think, probably emotionally, spiritually to do it. But I'm not a fan of Mary in particular. I find her, like I said, just I find her really difficult to understand her thoughts and what she was doing and why she did it. And I find her quite difficult to learn about. She's not my favorite. I know
Oh.
it's a very unpopular choice.
I feel like Mary is, making the rounds a little bit more and we're learning a little bit more about her. And that time will tell. I think the more research that comes out about these women, the more well-rounded picture maybe that we'll get of them. And that makes all like you said, if Elizabeth and Mary Queen of Scots had met, how would that have changed things? Would it have changed
Yeah,
Elizabeth's view on Mary? Who knows?
we never will know.
No. Well, we're talking about Mary the First, and of course she gets the moniker Bloody Mary a lot. Do you
Mhm.
think if you were to compare Mary the First, Elizabeth, and say Henry the Eighth, do you think Mary should still get the moniker Bloody, or should we give it to one of the other two?
No, I don't think Mary deserves it. Poor old Mary. She's suffered enough. She doesn't need to have that thrust upon her, in the aftermath of her life. I mean, I don't it's interesting, isn't it? Because almost that Mary is wicked or Mary is totally good and you should overturn everything you previously thought about her. And that's also not the case. She is a human being that sits somewhere in the middle. Um, and she did, burn hundreds of Catholics. No, she certainly didn't burn hundreds of Catholics.
That's an alternative history.
Read the book, guys. No, so she burnt hundreds of Protestants, but also so did her sister, and she isn't given the same uh caricature of her reign, but also Mary suffers from having such a short reign. That's the overriding kind of outcome from it. There was a failed marriage, a failed alliance. She lost Calais and she burned hundreds of people. And that's quite something to fit into with the 5 years she was on the throne, whereas the other monarchs at least had the time to present other versions of their story and complete and do other things, whereas Mary was stuck with that. And Elizabeth I had a great PR team to, to firmly poop on, the terrible sister and
Yeah.
worship, the phoenix rising from the ashes of the terrible nightmare that was Mary. So she doesn't deserve it. She doesn't deserve to be excused from it either, but it's certainly not, she certainly shouldn't be Bloody Mary of all things to be given to the first Queen Regent. It's such a typical oh, just a typical thing. Like the first time we have a full Queen Regnant and she's tagged with the label as Bloody Mary. It's
Right.
just such a shame. Like the not celebrated for being the first and changing the wording of how to be crowned and all these sorts of interesting
Mhm.
things. She sort of just and she did a lot of the foundation work, I think, like you mentioned in the beginning, for Elizabeth becoming queen. So a lot of what Elizabeth did was based on what Mary did. So she also needs credit for that. Um, so I think you can't for me, I don't think you can beat killing two of your wives, I don't think. So I think the that title should go to the gentleman behind you on your door. I
Good
think
old.
that, yeah, I think that for me, it's killing two of your wives, threatening to do it to the last wife, and killing off your 70-year-old, cousin, second cousin, Margaret Pole. What would be the relation? Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Cousin. We can just say cousin.
So I think I'd be him myself. I think he deserves a term for, I think that even thinking about decapitating your spouse is beyond anything I can comprehend. So that goes to him.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. He should be Bloody Henry, except we'd have to have it start with something else instead of bloody. Anyway, we'll think about that
Yeah.
at a later time. But kind of on the topic of death and coming back to the gory ends part of your book, are there specific stories that really stood out to you where you went, "Whoa"?
Oh my God. So many. Um, I think for gory endings, Mary Queen of Scots having such a wildly botched execution, I think doesn't even made me feel ill when I was I was thinking when you hear the accounts and how it was in the back of the shoulders and the back of the head, and then eventually she was decapitated, and she apparently said, "Oh, Jesu," halfway through when they were trying to chop her head off. Like, holy heck, and it should be so clean and simple and swift, but to go and probably she was thinking, hoping, knowing that would be the case, and then to have this. I mean, I don't know what the pain would feel like, but I don't want to imagine,
No.
but it's so no, it's just so utterly horrifying in every single way. That really, really, really stayed with me. And I was looking into all sorts about how long can you be alive for if your head's chopped off. And then I went like on a rabbit down a rabbit hole of at the French Revolution, and when people were guillotined, some apparently were moving, some could talk, somebody looked over when they said their name. And I went down a really dark, dark time
Yeah.
whilst researching the book. I was like, this is nightmare fuel to think about all of this in any sort of capacity was wild. But Mary Queen of Scots stands out because it was such a horror show when it should have been at least dignified for this, former queen. I think not that she deserves it more than anyone else, but on paper it should be as clean can be, which is, it makes you think, well, Henry was correct in getting the French swordsman come and to deal with Anne Boleyn that way, because it was a clean, known to be extremely efficient, good good way to have your head chopped off. Like, I don't know how to justify that.
I
What I mean?
know.
If one is to be ordering an execution, that's the way that one should do it. Um, so to have it go so horrifically wrong, I mean, beggars belief. And then learning about how when you'd be hung, drawn, and quartered, hung by the neck till not quite dead, have your insides opened up, your innards taken out, burnt in front of you, and then have your genitals cut off, arms, legs, head, to be then displayed all around London. And again, people would take their picnics and their families to watch, the whoever was being killed that day. So,
Yeah.
so even think, because you just say the words, don't you? I find sometimes when I'm writing my the content, you just say hung, drawn, and quartered, and you kind of move on with what you're explaining. But when you stop and think and actually write out what it is and think about what it is that is happening to these people's bodies, you do not do it whilst eating. That's for sure.
No. No, it's terrible. It really and when you think of it, like being beheaded by axe was seen as mercy by comparison, and yet I don't know. The hang drawn and quartered thing always blows my mind, and I'm sorry if this is morbid, but I have thought about this too. That they hang you to the point where you're not quite dead, and then they cut you open, and I had wondered before too, sitting there thinking, okay, at the moment that they cut you open and start pulling out your insides, I'm pretty sure, I'm hoping at that point you're already dead.
Oh my God, a shock, I think, would be more. I don't even, because I read some uh primary sources from the time of some hanging from somebody, and the man was screaming as his insides were taken out. I think, how does the body not take over and just lights out?
Yeah.
Just you stop surely from the shock, but apparently not. I mean, maybe for some people, but oh my God. absolutely, when you really, really think about it and look at it, you just think, oh God.
It's terrible, isn't it?
It's so terrible. But so though, those sorts of, traitors' deaths, think, oh God, no.
Yeah.
Making
Yeah.
me cringe now, like going into
I know.
myself.
Yeah,
Oh.
let's change the subject now. Sorry I went to that dark place.
Well, it's part of that's what part of the research was for, and
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that's funny because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is how do you handle the emotional weight of stories involving children, imprisonment, or execution, especially when the are sparse? I think maybe you kind of answered that already.
Yeah, definitely. It's just you have to just to do what you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
And deal like, especially I think maybe perhaps when like learning about Catherine Gray and how her one of her sons was like removed from her and things, and she went into such a decline so quickly. It made because I've got a she's just turned 2, a little toddler, so I can't fathom her being removed and taken and all these sorts of things. So that kind of puts you in a different mindset, and also on a completely kind of other level of like Elizabeth I wasn't yet 3 when Anne was executed. And I'm looking at my daughter thinking, what would you remember from me if I
Right.
disappeared when you were coming up to 3? Like, what would you think about and what would you know? And obviously, it's very different. Like, I'm with her every day, all day. That's a very different, queen and princess relationship. Although she
Yeah.
probably considers her a princess, I'm pretty sure, in her life. That's interesting. Yeah, because you think, oh, she wouldn't remember anything. Elizabeth never remembered anything of her mother. Of course she didn't. But when being with a toddler, you think, do you remember her? Because certainly with her, she does know and remember certain little things. You think, how would that have affected you? And when would you have understood? And she said that famous phrase of yesterday, princess, today, my lady,
Lady.
how
Yeah.
so? So you think obviously she was extremely bright. So you wonder how soon she did learn, understand, and what it meant and what had happened. One of my followers had asked me about it, and I did a video on it about when do I think she was told, and how did that affect her? And so it was likely going to be Kat Ashley or Blanche Parry who would have
Mm.
told her at some point. Um, but it was fascinating to think about and putting it in perspective, I suppose. But as much as one can within the context of today versus hundreds of years ago, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a tragic part of Elizabeth's story. As much as I don't like her, I do feel for her when it comes to losing her mother at such an early age. And it is an interesting question. When was she told? It does make me wonder if maybe she was told right away, just like rip off the band-aid and tell her, and then we don't have to worry about it later on when she's more emotional.
Yeah, you do. It's just unless it's written down somewhere that more will appear, you know, I doubt we will ever fully know. But I would put a pretty hefty bet on it being one of those 2 women who did tell her. And also, did she know the truth? Did she actually know that her mum didn't do anything and it was trumped up and made up? Because on the surface of it, you're going to tell, however young she was, you're going to tell a young girl that your mother slept with your uncle and she plotted to kill your dad, and now he killed her. What? Like again, when you really read out what she was charged with,
Yeah.
you know, you could have have Elizabeth grow up saying, yeah, and should have died. Like it's a good thing she was caught because she was going to kill the king, my father, and blah blah blah. And you don't have. It's just so wild, isn't it? The
Yeah.
actual tale of Anne's end. Who was the one to tell her like this didn't happen, but this is what your dad accused your mum of? How does that work?
You just made me realize something that there's a lot of similarity between Elizabeth and her mother and James the Sixth and his mother Mary, Queen of Scots in that respect, where they didn't really know their own mothers. I mean, granted, Mary, Queen of Scots lived much longer, but James didn't really know her. So his connection to her was quite weak Whereas maybe Elizabeth kind of held on to that connection to her mother a little bit more than James did. I don't know. What do you think?
I I would I would think so myself. I've always thought that there's always that kind of legend that Anne's image was burned away from everything and destroyed, and Henry had a cull and everything. There was obviously a natural progression changeover of wives and imagery and everything on the palaces and stuff, but there wasn't a nationwide disbandment of anything to do with her. So it just makes you think, like, in Elizabeth's household at Hatfield, her mother's portrait was taken down. Was it given to Elizabeth? Was it kept for Elizabeth? Was it still up somewhere at Hatfield because, or wherever Elizabeth was at the time, because Henry wouldn't come and see her because she was the bastard and that was that? Would Elizabeth have visited Anne of Cleves at Hever Castle when Anne lived there? Because Elizabeth wasn't far away. It's not documented, but they did get on and they lived quite close. So did that ever happen? And because there was an image of Anne at Hever at some point, was that still there when Anne of Cleves was there? Did she keep it for Elizabeth? And all these interesting little kind of details and stuff. So I think Anne was probably more alive and around for Elizabeth than I think is given credit for, I think. And Elizabeth picked a lot of Anne's relatives to be with her all the time, really consistently throughout her life. So yes, she was an orphan, I suppose, when, both parents died, but she did have a lot of family from her mother's side with her. So you wonder if they kept Anne's reputation and image alive for her. Whereas, like you say, James, he had nothing to do with his mum and she was in disgrace, really, wasn't she? She wasn't certainly celebrated in Scotland. So it wouldn't have had somebody in his ear saying, "Oh, your mum's amazing." It would, unless he did, I don't know. But from what I can tell, he didn't have someone who was like bigging up his mum. So you don't know. But yes, coming from children of traitors is a fascinating connection between the two
Yeah.
of them.
Well, not every summer we meet for a trip.
Vacation has officially begun on Netflix.
To best enjoy your trip, we suggest the following itinerary.
I say we just wing it.
Wing it.
See where the wind takes us.
From best-selling author Emily Henry
Are you guys like a thing?
Oh, no, we're just friends.
Platonic travel companions.
comes your next favorite rom-com.
Who wants to go skinny dipping? Alex does.
Vacation, Alex!
I love it when you get weird.
People We Meet on Vacation, now playing on Netflix. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.
Your mother is amazing. Even though we made her abdicate her throne, she was amazing.
We made a mistake.
Whoopsies.
Yeah.
Well, Elizabeth, I'd like to finish up our interview today by checking in with you and seeing if there was one story in particular from the book that maybe you wanted to share with the audience to kind of hook them into picking it up.
Oh gosh. It's like taking a favorite child. To hook people in, there's lots of stuff about some ghosts in
Oh,
here. People likes ghosts and gore. Oh my gosh. I think it's rather than just one story, I think it's the women who kind of pepper through the text, and it's their little anecdotes and facets of their life that can come into a little bit more of a sharper focus rather than being like a little tidbit in a bigger book about somebody else. I like the fact that there's sometimes like Anne Seymour, Duchess of Somerset. She's hard work, but she's really interesting.
she is.
She's a dragon, but she's really fascinating. And how Catherine Parr had a really shocking afterlife. Her body had a belter of a story, and that is in the book. So that could be like that's a big story to go in this one. If people like tales of dead bodies and digging them up. So for a hook, that could be one of them. But for me personally, it was just such a joy to have some women in a little bit of a sharper focus in their own Tudor tale rather than just being a little paragraph within something else. So I think that's what I am most proud of and what I think can be gleaned the most from this book.
Wonderful. Elizabeth, when does your book officially come out?
It comes out February 19th.
Well,
So
this episode is going out still in January. So if you guys are listening or watching this episode, be sure to grab a book of Bloody Brilliant Tudors, 100 Tales of Gowns, Gossip, and Gory Ends. I love that title, by the way.
thank you so much. That was a lot of spitballing to get that title. A lot of back and forth. Like, what can we're having like mind maps, we're doing everything. But I love the title so much. It's so good.
It's a great title. And if people want to pre-order the book before it comes out, where can they do that?
Anywhere and everywhere you can order your books, wherever you like to do it, it is available. There's a link in my bio for wherever you fancy doing it, basically.
Perfect. And I will include links to everything in the show notes as well. Elizabeth Goff, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
Thanks for listening to Tudors, Dynasty, and Beyond. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you never miss a new release. And if you loved it, leave a quick review. It helps more history lovers find the show. Want to support the podcast and get bonus content? Head to patreon.com/tudorsdynasty. You can also find the link in the show notes of this episode. Join the conversation with Rebecca on social media at Tudors Dynasty. Until next time.